I don't normally do this, but in today's case, I'm going to tell you explicit and very graphic details of what happened at the murder scene. The reason I'm doing this is because despite Karla's incredibly troubled childhood and her swap to Christianity, I don't want to minimize the brutality of what she did for the sake of not making anybody uncomfortable. If I'm going to tell this story, I have to tell it in detail, because what happened on June 13th is a literal horror movie. So grab your blankets today, because you're going to need them.
There were absolutely signs all throughout my childhood that there was something wrong, and nobody stopped to really check into that. So
Karla Faye Tucker thought that she was born into an ordinary family. I mean, we all think we are until we find out that we're not. But she lived in a middle-class home in Houston. Her parents were happily married. She had sisters, and they even had a vacation home. But home is not always what it seems like from the outside looking in. And soon, Karla's mother would tell her a secret that changed everything. Now, what seemed like a happy home quickly spiraled into hard drugs, violence, and even prostitution. Even at the age of 14, Karla was completely losing her identity. And when you're having these type of feelings, all you want to do is escape. And she escaped through drugs, sex, fighting. I mean, she was fighting her friends, her family, her husbands, anyone and everyone. She had a lot of emotions that were pent up inside of her. And a lot of these feelings were anger and rage. Anger and rage that she was never protected from a young age. Anger and rage that so many bad things happened to her. But when you have been abused for so long, you start to believe that you don't deserve to be protected. So Karla had this incessant need to protect others in the way that she was never protected. But that was combined with this incredibly angry and violent itch deep inside of her. So when she found out that a guy that she didn't like hit one of her friends, nothing could stop her rage. And absolutely nothing could stop Karla from picking up a 3-foot pickaxe and turning to murder. Almost everything we do is online right now, and you need to protect yourself. Not to scare you or anything, but just because you haven't been targeted yet doesn't mean you won't ever be. Who knows when some data broker is going to buy a list with your information on it? Or who knows if your kid isn't going to pop off on TikTok one day and now suddenly people are looking for you, your name, and your family. It's true. It's very, very real. And the least we can do is protect ourselves online. I hate to tell you, but internet security is just as important as a Netflix subscription these days. And most people don't have it. With Aura, you can have them remove your information from data broker websites, get identity protection, get parental controls, and fraud checks all wrapped up in one place. This is something I'm very passionate about because so many companies put millions of dollars into marketing, but they don't put a single dollar into data protection. So anytime that we're putting in our email address, our address, our passwords for accounts that we also end up using for banking, emails, or whatever, when those data lists get leaked, you're in trouble. And I feel like not enough people are talking about this. Look, let me be clear. This is a paid sponsorship, but also something I'm incredibly passionate about. And it's not just you. All of this stuff is protected. It's not like the phone books back in the day where you're just looking up one specific name and number. All of this is connected to your previous addresses, your family, anyone that you know. And a lot of times also, that information can be used to answer security questions on other websites that are supposed to be secure. So let's just nip it in the butt right now and get that information taken down. Stop data brokers from exposing your personal information and selling it for profit. Go to aura.com/sinister and sign up today. If you use our code SINISTER, you can get a free 14-day trial and see who all is already selling your information. And when you sign up, make sure you turn those alerts on and take them seriously. And hey, next time you get an email that says your information is on the dark web or something got leaked, change your password. You'll thank me later. Go to aura.com/sinister. It's November 18th. 1959, and Karla Faye Tucker has just been born in Houston, Texas. Starting things off, she had a pretty happy childhood with her 2 parents and her 2 sisters. Her sisters' names were Carrie and Kathy, both with a K. That'll come up again later. Not the K, just the fact that their names were Carrie and Kathy. Her dad, Larry, had a good job as a longshoreman in the Gulf of Mexico. Like, basically, his job was to load and unload ships on a daily basis. And, you're dealing a lot with delicate inventory, different weights and things. So it's a pretty meticulous job. And he was actually paid well enough that his wife could stay at home. And she was basically a homemaker and took care of the 3 girls. They had a nice life in a middle-class neighborhood in Houston, Texas. And they actually had a little cottage in a city called Brazoria in Texas. They would vacation at the cottage. I ain't have no cottage. Overall, this is pretty nice. Her parents worked hard to set up a normal foundation for the girls. Karla remembered the early years of her childhood pretty fondly. She said later in an interview, "I was just an itty-bitty girl. We were family, and we used to go to the bay house, do neat things with the boat, and the dog, and water skiing, fishing, and all that stuff." It wasn't until she was about 7 or 8 years old that everything changed. But what's also interesting about this is giving a child a foundation of a nice life for the first 5, 6, or 7 years of their life, and then suddenly ripping that away into what Karla divulged into is extremely confusing. Some people are born into this world with shitty parents and all they know is mental or physical, psychological abuse. But Karla kind of had the rug pulled under her when she finds out about her family secret. Family secrets are the worst, man. Before we get to the big secret, let me fill you in on a couple things. Now, her parents, Larry and Carol, they did try very hard to set up a normal life. I think it's because they knew they were not normal. Larry and Carol would kind of fight behind the scenes a whole lot, but it would ultimately end in them getting a full-blown divorce. I mean, all the way through. And then months or sometimes weeks later, getting back together. This actually happened 2 or 3 times. You know how horrible it is finding out your parents are getting divorced when you're younger? Now imagine that happening 2 or 3 times. It's what is happening? So Larry was trying to figure out his own thing, and he would be gone for weeks or months at a time, and not just for work. He was just trying to figure himself out. And he'd come back, and there would be a divorce happening, or one of the parents would cheat on each other. There was a whole lot of adultery going on back and forth in the relationship. But oddly enough, they actually shielded this from the kids a bit until Karla was 7 or 8 years old, and that's when just everything unraveled. During all of this, Karla was also having some identity issues because she felt like she was the ugly one out of her sisters. Karla was not an ugly girl. She had these big almond brown eyes. She had these chubby little cheeks. She had brown hair. She was cute. But her sisters, they were a little more fair-skinned. They were blonde. They were kind of stereotypical 70s pretty. And this made Karla really insecure because she's like, why don't I look like my sisters? Why aren't I pretty like that? Why do I look like this? And she was always comparing herself to them. And while Karla's struggling with these identity issues, the sisters, who are a little bit older, they understand more of how bad things are with their parents. So Karla's older sisters turned to doing drugs at a really young age. There's a story where one time Karla caught her 2 sisters smoking pot. And she was like, hey, you can't do that. And they were like, well, why don't you try it? And they got Karla to smoke weed, and she was only 10 or 11 years old. And she smokes it, and then they said to her, well, now you did it too, so you can't tell. So she had these cool older sisters that were doing their thing, smoking pot, smoking cigarettes, hanging out with older guys. Oh, her sisters had a lot of older friends. So not only does Karla want to look like her older sisters, but she wants to be like them. And they're kind of indoctrinating her in, letting her smoke a little pot, letting her smoke a cigarette when she's 10, letting her hang out with these older guys when she's literally a child. This is probably one of the more crazy age gap things I've heard. Karla is 10 or 11 years old, and her sisters are introducing her to these 20-year-old bikers. And she's just in this environment. Now, I don't know exactly how old she was for this story, but I estimate that this one happened sometime between Karla being 10 years old and 14 years old. But remember I said she was hanging out with all those older bikers? Well, at one point, one of the bikers had come to the house and was looking for Carrie, her sister. And Karla's like, well, they're not home right now. And then the guy says, okay, you want to ride with me and do some heroin? And Karla's like, yeah, sure. So the old creepy biker dude gives her heroin, and she's like so doped up that he just kind of like drops her back off. And when Karla talked about this story later, she thought that he was going to assault her, probably, like that was probably his plan, but she was so out of it, he just dropped her back off at the house. And she tells that story quite a bit, like recalling it like it's a very major memory, not only because of the possible impending assault, because in her teenage years, she was exposed to a high dosage of heroin. For how much emotional pain and trauma she was going through, he just exposed her to something that made her feel better in the moment, and it was a wrap. Karla was set out to be a drug addict. Now, misplaced empathy check, okay? Right now, I totally understand a lot of people might be feeling like, oh my God, this girl had a really horrible life. I want to remind you, this is a very gruesome murder story. The point of Sinister, how often you guys hear me say this, is I don't just pick cases where somebody was just born into this world with some crazy brain and they're like, kill, kill, kill. I pick cases about real human people that have been through extreme trauma, and I talk you through it until we get to the point where they make a choice that turns them into a murderer and therefore get cast out of society. So the point of me telling these stories is for you to look at your own situations or look at people you know and think to yourself, should I get some help? Because maybe what you went through is very, very serious. So even though this is about to get worse and you're definitely going to feel some empathy for Karla, remember, she should not have done what she did. But we'll get there. I don't want to leave out parts of her story to just like demonize her and paint this whole story of like a murderous killer. I want to show the human parts of people and then where they went wrong, where very human people end up losing their humanity. Because that's why we watch true crime a lot. We're like, how did this happen? And as I continue to tell you Karla's story, you're going to understand exactly how this happened. But that does not mean that she should have walked free. So where were Karla's parents at this time? They were completely out of the picture trying to figure out their own lives. While their 11 or 12-year-old daughter is shooting up dope with 20-year-old dudes, they're finalizing their divorce. At the end of the divorce, that's when Karla finds out her mother's secret. Larry, her dad, he wasn't really her dad. She was actually the product of an extramarital affair, and her dad wasn't in the picture. That's why she looked different than all of her sisters. This sent the already traumatized Karla Faye Tucker into an absolute identity spiral. Who was her real family? What's real? What's not? This is something that I think a lot of people go through, because if you don't have any strong family to fall back on, you end up really looking for a sense of community. And sometimes we find those communities online, sometimes we find those communities in the church, or sometimes those communities become whatever is served up to us first. And unfortunately for Karla, the community that was served to her first were the bikers. Now, it's interesting because some biker gangs are tough guys with a big heart. They're like total softies. But then some biker gangs are just straight up, criminal rings that don't have any laws or morals, right? I used to live in Las Vegas, and I've been in a crew that was like adjacent to some biker people. And those dudes that I knew, they would never let a 10-year-old shoot up heroin, okay? They would beat the out of anybody who brought the needle near the child. So these guys, I don't even know if they were a biker gang. I think they were just druggies on bikes. But this is who Karla saw as her family. They accepted her more than her current family, which was falling apart. And also, don't forget, her sisters, who she's known her entire life, they were part of this family. Lumi is making it so none of us have to worry about BO ever again. Because unlike other deodorants, Lumi is powered by mandelic acid, which just changes everything. I'm actually also so stoked that we have Lumi as a sponsor because I saw a comment a couple days ago that said, "Yay, BOZE, I'm so glad we're promoting Lumi. It's changed my whole life." Dude, it's amazing. It's a full body deodorant that you can use anywhere, but then they also have a couple of other specialized products. And the best part is this gives you 72-hour control from pits to feet. Now, ideally, you're putting on your deodorant every time you leave the house, but if you forget one day, Lumi's actually got you covered. Lumi was professionally created by an OBGYN that had a concern about body odor and wanted to help people with that. And now, fast forward a couple years, and it's got over 300,000 5-star reviews. Look, you can't argue with that. It's baking soda free, paraben free, and it's pH balanced, so you're clear to use it below the belt. That's what it's made for. They have bright, fresh scents that are not too overwhelming, like clean tangerine, lavender sage, or toasted coconut. And trust me, they are not overwhelming. Very, very light, and it does its job. The best part is you can actually try the Lumi starter pack if you've never used Lumi before, and you don't have to make any serious decisions. They just wrap it all up for you in one package. So you can use my code Sinister to get 15% off of all Lumi products. And if you want to try the starter pack, it's already a little discounted, so you'll get a little bit more there. Once again, use the code SINISTER for 15% off your first purchase at lumideodorant.com. That's LUMEDEODORANT.com. Now, because Karla's dad was the one that was actually working, he ended up getting sole custody of all 3 of the girls. But Karla really wanted to live with her mom. And that's kind of understandable because Larry wasn't her real dad. She wanted to go be with her real mom, and so she went and lived with her. By the age of 12 years old, Karla started having sex and left school. She would act out sexually within the proximity of her mother, and her mom kind of witnessed it and didn't do anything. This was a clear cry for help. Like, she's a child, you know? This stuff that she was doing, and she kind of said it later in interviews, it was a cry for attention. It was a cry for help. And her mom didn't do anything. In fact, her mom started to act more like they were best friends. In an interview later, Karla would go on to say that she and her mom shared drugs like lipstick. She also said, "There were a couple things my mother did that made me wonder, don't you see what you're doing to me? Why don't you notice this and come ask me what's going on?" By the age of 14, Karla had completely dropped out of school and she turned to prostitution. There were 2 things that she knew at the age of 14, drugs and sex. And now she had found a system where she could use sex to get money to buy drugs. And this was the way that she decided to live her life because it was all she knew and nobody would help her. Her mom was doing it, her sisters were doing it, everyone around her was doing it. She didn't know anything else. There are people that are genetically addicts. There are people that are very depressed and can be prone to addiction or substance abuse. But regardless of which one someone is, there is one thing that almost all addicts love. Love. The addiction of love, the feeling of love, the euphoria of love. It's like no other, especially when you're used to tumultuous love and you've had a tumultuous life, the high, low, high, low, high, low, everything. And also, remember some of the things that Karla said. She was looking for somebody to save her. She was looking for her mother to save her. Well, when you're somebody like that and a guy comes into your life, especially one that's doing well and he loves big, it's like the skies open up. And that's how it was for Karla when she met her first husband. His name was Stephen Griffin. She was 16 and he was 19 years old. He had a bike and he only worked about 6 months out of the year and made $20,000 a year. Now, I don't know how accurate this is, but I just used a government website inflation calculator to see how much $20,000 was in 1975 compared to now. And this thing tells me it was about $120,000. That's how much Stephen Griffin was making back in 1975, only working 6 months out of the year. He felt like the man. This makes a little more sense now because when I was reading his interviews, he acted like he was on top of the world back then, and that makes sense. That's a lot of money. He met Karla at a park one day. He said that she was sitting with her friends smoking a joint, and he walked up, started chatting with her, and they clicked almost instantly. She was charismatic, she could banter. She was tough. He thought she was beautiful. It was just an instant connection. And I think for Karla, the skies just opened up. They had a pretty tumultuous relationship, though. They would fight all the time, and not just argue, physical fights. He later described her as tough, but he felt like she always had his back. In their fights, Stephen would say that Karla sometimes hit him harder than a man did. But he kind of just processed that as, well, if anything ever happens to me, Karla's going to protect me. He reminisced on her, saying, "That girl had so much potential. She could talk to anyone and make them feel at ease. She was charismatic. Even when she was on drugs and could hardly walk, she was beautiful." They loved each other, but Karla got married young, and she had a wild streak. So she ultimately ended up leaving Stephen because she said she wanted to explore more. Now, considering how messed up their relationship was, I really doubt they sat down and Karla had a conversation like, "Stephen, we got married when I was really, really young. And, I think I really just want to get out into the world and explore." It was probably something more along the lines of her breaking a bottle over his head and saying that she wanted out. I mean, that's just how the relationship was. But Stephen remembers her very fondly. Whenever he speaks about her, it's almost in a kind of ethereal way. And I get that, because for guys that have had like a really troubled past and their emotions are all locked up, meeting a fiery woman that's extremely traumatized but still hopeful and looking for the fun in life, it's magnetic. It's magnetic. He wouldn't be able to stay away from her almost no matter what she did. He knows her very, very well, though. He actually said that Karla wants so badly to find a home. Like I said earlier, she wants community. He said that when there's any semblance of a home, she feels like she doesn't deserve it, and then she destroys it. He said she was a good wife, though. She stayed home, she cleaned, she made food for him, kind of like her mom did for Larry. But when they broke up, Stephen told people that Karla was either going to get killed or she was going to kill somebody. She had a temper, and he knew it. So now it's 1981. Karla is in her early 20s, and she is continuing her wild streak. I'm surprised that you can do drugs, hard drugs, for 11 years straight and not want to stop. Oh my God, I'll drink for 2 days straight, and I'm like, I can't do it anymore. She was just going. This was all she knew. It was a rock star life. I also read that she had kind of become a groupie for the Allman Brothers band at one point, but that was when she was 15. She was following people around, following bands around, just like her mom did. It was a fast life. So anyways, we're back to 1981, and she's still doing it. She's still partying. She ends up moving in with a friend named Shawn Jackson. Shawn was a lady, and the two are very, very close friends. Until one day, Shawn brings over her new guy. And this guy's name is Jerry Dean. Jerry Lynn Dean. He comes from Tyler, Texas. I like to tell you guys the names of different cities because I know you guys are all over the place. And you're like, oh my God, that's where I live. So Jerry, he's from Tyler, Texas. And he's a rough guy. All of these guys are rough guys. He comes from a big family. He's got both parents around. He's got several siblings. And he had just finished serving in the U.S. Coast Guard. So he's back home, and he's ready to party with everybody too. But he has some kind of grit about him that Karla doesn't like. And Karla gets along with most guys. Karla's interesting because she's not just like a pick-me girl. I mean, she had girlfriends that she was really close with, like Shawn, her roommate. Shawn was a girl, once again. Karla doesn't really care about anybody's gender. She just likes what she likes. And she knew she didn't like Jerry Dean. She especially hated him because one of the first times that she met him, he had driven his motorcycle right into their like front living room of the house that they lived in, and his motorcycle was a piece of crap, so oil was dripping all over the place, all over the carpet, and he didn't care. He just pulled the motorcycle into the living room and oil's dripping everywhere, and he's like, Shawn, baby, and she's like, hi, welcome home. And Karla's like, what the fuck? I also thought this was very interesting. By all accounts, it seems like Karla was a pretty clean person. Like, she wasn't just like a messy drug addict. Like, she liked to have a little bit of order. I thought that was interesting. But this isn't just about cleanliness. It's also about the disrespect. I'm sure that he didn't want to take any accountability for the oil on the rug. And so, he puts it back on her. And immediately, Karla's like, oh no, I don't know you. I don't like this. And she hates him from the very start. But she kind of has to get used to Jerry because Sean really liked him. In fact, Sean ended up marrying Jerry in 1983. So Karla and Sean lived together for about 1.5 or 2 years. Karla was seeing Jerry all the time. And she just hated him from the very jump. So when Sean and Jerry get married, Karla's like, dude, I'm out of here. I'm going to go live with my sister. So she goes off to move in with her new boyfriend, a guy named Danny, and her sister, Carrie. The 3 sisters, they are doing drugs, hanging out with old weird dudes. Like, the system is set. It's been this way since the beginning of time. Now, the interesting thing about this house is it's Karla, Danny, her boyfriend, as well as Carrie, the sister. And all 3 of them have a lot of different friends. So there's always people coming in and out of the house, staying over, sleeping over for a few nights. It's a party house. But above all, it is a violent drug house. Carrie and Karla come from a family where tumultuous relationships are normal and abuse is love. Violence is love. She was often getting into physical fights with her mother, physical fights with her sister from a very young age, and they all stayed together, right? So I'm going to give you an example story. I had a friend that I grew up with where her mom had some kind of problem, and she would come in and pick fights with her daughter all the time, and they would get into physical fights. Like, my friend would literally, I'd be over there for a sleepover, and my friend would have to, wake up and square up because her mom might fucking box her. And to this day, they're still close, but this mother taught the daughter that abuse is love because she's hitting her, but then, still giving her dinner, still giving her a house, still giving her, what we would perceive as love. And so when I think about that, and I think about this home, that the sisters were physically fighting each other, the mom was physically fighting each other. This is not a red flag to them as it is to us. This is just like a way of life. You get in fights. To them, you get in fights with people you love. To them, you do drugs with people you love. You have sex with people you love. And so this house that most of us would describe as a war zone was full of comfort and love for them, which is so interesting. So the 3 of them are in the house. Reminder, this is Carrie, Karla's sister, Karla, and her boyfriend, Danny. Which, by the way, who knows if Karla and Danny are still together at this time because, their parents were always cheating, divorcing, whatever. This was not a holy matrimony, okay? So neither is Sean's relationship. Sean, her old roommate. Sean actually comes back to Karla, comes to her new house, and she's like, things are not going well with Sean. We're having a lot of troubles. We're not fighting. Like, he's beating me. He punched me in the nose. Now, also, reminder, we aren't putting up with no dudes beating up on no ladies. But also, just to let you know the state of the home, everybody was beating everybody up, okay? It was happening all the time. Karla was throwing punches left and right. But in this particular situation, Sean said that Jerry had gotten mad, and it wasn't a fight. He had punched her in the nose, and it was different this time. And this upsets Karla. Karla's tough, but she doesn't always, take care of herself. She's one of those people that feels like she doesn't deserve to be protected. And that's probably because nobody protected her when she was younger. But she does like to protect other people. Karla protects other people the way that she wishes that she would have been protected. And it's amplified because Karla doesn't like Jerry. And Jerry is the perpetrator. And Karla has a scary reputation. She's very no nonsense. Like, everyone was fighting, but Karla was a heavy contender. No woman and no man wanted to get on Karla's bad side. She had a lot of rage pent up in her. I always say when people get into fights, like, school fights, street fights, or something like that, it It doesn't always matter if somebody knows how to fight, especially most of the time because both people don't know how to fight. It matters what one person is mad about because they will take you out real fast. So Karla says, well, come on, let's go over to you and Jerry's old house and we're going to go get your stuff. And she's in protector mode. She's in bulldog mode. She knows that Jerry hit Sean and she said, Jerry ain't going to hit me. Jerry ain't going to hit Sean again. Let's go get your stuff, baby girl. And so they go over there and Sean's getting her stuff and Karla's waiting outside and Jerry comes out and he doesn't just walk out. He says something to her and Karla just decks this man straight up in the eye. I told you, she was tough. She gave him a black eye. Not to mention, now that Sean and Jerry have broken up, Karla doesn't have a reason to be nice to Jerry. She doesn't care about him. And honestly, she hates him. So as a reminder, in Sinister, we talk about real people. We talk about real humans. The things that happened to Karla in her childhood were absolutely not her fault. But as you guys know, when you're dealing with levels of trauma like this, there are signs that pop up. There are things in your life that let you know, maybe I'm going down the wrong path. Maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. And whatever those signs were for Karla, and you know exactly what I'm talking about because y'all that have been on the wrong path, you know we be hitting our head up against the wall several times, and sometimes you listen and sometimes you don't. But if you don't listen to the little signs that life gives you, they will give you a big wake-up call to who you are and the fact that you're going down the wrong path. Whether it's waking up from a bender or your 5th hangover that week, or it's spending the night in jail from beating up your husband, there are always going to be signs. But sometimes people get out of jail and go right back to doing the same thing. On June 11th, 1983, Karla was celebrating her sister Carrie's birthday. This was not a regular birthday party. This was a night of absolute mayhem. Carrie's birthday started off with Danny, Carrie, Karla, Sean, the usual suspects. But it's Carrie's birthday. Let's invite everybody. Let's invite everyone we know. Let's all get a bunch of alcohol. Let's get a bunch of drugs. You know they was doing drugs. And then on top of that, we're all gonna fuck each other. Like, that's what was going on this night. They were drinking. They were shooting up. They were doing cocaine. They were going in the room. They were fucking in the kitchen. It was just absolute debauchery. To them, just letting their spirits free in the 80s was just, honestly, this was probably like nothing you have ever seen before, okay? And get this, guys, it doesn't just last one day. This went on for 3 days. Over and over and over again, passing out in the hallway, waking up groggy-eyed, taking a shot, and just grabbing the nearest line of drugs. Like, that's what this was. It was a complete bender for as long as they could go. They started on June 11th, and then in the early hours of the 13th, they started to run out of drugs. They took everything they had as quickly as they could, and it still lasted them just over 2 days. So on the third day, around 2 in the morning or so, Karla actually remembers that Jerry owes her some money, and she also decided that she wanted it back right now. Does Jerry actually owe her money? I'm not sure about that because remember, Karla and Jerry absolutely hate each other. Why would he loan her any money for anything? But the plan actually isn't to knock on Jerry's door and say, hey, Jerry, how about that money you owe me? It was actually to steal his bike. He had a very expensive bike in his garage, probably amongst other things, and they are thieves and drug addicts. So their plan was to steal the bike, sell it at 3 o'clock in the morning, and get money for more drugs. So everyone is high out of their mind when they come up with this plan to intimidate him and then steal his money and steal his drugs. And they feel like he deserves it because they don't like him. You know, they're like, he hit Sean. They're like, yeah, let's do this. So between 2:30 in the morning and 4:30 in the morning, Karla, her on and off again boyfriend Danny, and a guy named James LeBrun all go over to Jerry's house. Karla was able to get entry into his house because she had stolen a key from Sean. Supposedly, they planned to rob him and intimidate him, but they didn't walk in and start looking for Jerry Dean's possessions. They went straight into his bedroom. Now, Karla had been saying for a few days how much she hated him, how much he was a loser, he was an asshole, and he was going to get it. She said she wanted to fucking kill him so bad. And she told everybody that. But, they thought Karla's just talking. Before they went to the house, they were high still on whatever drugs that they had left. And sticking with the plan of intimidation, Karla walks in and she sees a 3-foot pickaxe in his home. Can you imagine the anger, the resentment, the drug-fueled strength you would have to pick up a heavy 3-foot pickaxe and use that as your intimidation weapon? I mean, they had actually brought a shotgun with them, but Karla chose to pick up this axe. She picked up the axe, and while Jerry Dean was asleep in his bed, she put it up to his face, and she told him, "Don't move, motherfucker, or you're dead." And when he wakes up and sees Karla, drug addict Karla, has broken into his house at 2:00 in the morning, and she's holding a pickaxe to his face, Jerry Dean is scared. Of course he would be. There was all this animosity and all this shit talk and all this hitting each other back and forth. But at this point, he knows Karla is crazy. She is in his home and she means business. He is scared and he starts to beg for his life. And Karla likes this. She likes the power. For somebody like her that needs safety, that needs security, being in a position of power, especially when somebody fears you, it makes you feel safe. It makes you feel comfortable. But also, don't forget, she's wired wrong and she's on drugs. Even though she gave him a warning, the warning, which he complied with, was followed up with her hitting him with the pickaxe. And Jerry Dean starts to beg for his life. Can you imagine the pain and the force of this large, sharp, rusty metal object being swung into your body by an angry drug addict that hates you? The hits are heavy, they are sharp, and they're fast. Every time Karla picked up the pickaxe, she was happy and she smiled. And she dug it deeper into him with more force every time. Karla would later go on to say, with every hit of the pickaxe, she got more and more and more aroused, to the point that she had an orgasm while she was murdering Jerry. And she kept going. Every hit of the pickaxe for Karla was essentially like sex. She continued to hit him over 20 times, over and over and over again. And even when she achieved some type of pleasure, she kept going in hopes of more. They saw her in the room hitting him and smiling and enjoying it and making sounds. And when they were done killing him, as he begged for his life, they scavenged the room looking for more objects to sell. But what they actually found in the room was a woman hiding under the covers. Her name was Deborah. And Deborah was having issues with her husband. And so that night, she had actually met Jerry and decided to go home with him. She was asleep in the bed next to him while he begged for his life, and Karla murdered him and enjoyed it with pleasure. For the drug addicts, this causes a lot of panic. Karla really only hated Jerry, but now they have a problem on their hands. Danny switches from the horror of how excited his girlfriend was while she was committing this murder to feeling like they had a problem and they needed to get a solution. It is impossible to imagine the level of fear that Deborah was experiencing while she lay under the covers, hiding, hoping nobody would find her. But they did, and now they're looking at her. They took the pickaxe and held it against her, and they said if she wanted to live and see daylight, that she needed to get under the covers again and hide. And so she did, hoping that maybe they would go away. But instead, she was met under the covers with another strike of the pickaxe. But this is more of a frenzied killing. This is you're a witness and you have to die. It wasn't as hard and heavy as Jerry was getting hit while Karla enjoyed it. It was light and sharp and light and sharp and frenzied and frenzied and frenzied and frenzied. And it was happening so sporadically and so painfully that Deborah screamed and she begged, please kill me. Please kill me. I can't. Please kill me. She screamed and begged for them to just do a final blow to put her out of her misery. I mean, blood-curdling screams for them to just kill her. She knew she was going to die, and she wanted it to happen quickly. In this moment, Karla had pulled the sheets off of Deborah, and this is when James LeBrant came back into the room. James is the other guy that's not Karla's boyfriend. James LeBrant had gone back into the car to keep watch, but he was nodding off on something, so he was pretty much half asleep. So Danny wakes him up to come back into the house to help them gather stuff, and he said that when he entered the apartment, he heard gurgling noises. He said that it sounded like an aquarium pump that wasn't working. And when he walked into the house and he turned the corner, he saw Karla standing over the woman's body. He has no idea who this woman is. And she's got one foot on the body trying to jerk this pickaxe out of her. And Karla pulls the pickaxe out of her body and raises it over her head like a horror movie. And she looks at James LeBrant, smiles at him, and then drives the pickaxe down into the woman's throat with blood splurting everywhere. He was so stunned by this that he left and fled back to the car because he was scared. Dean and Deborah died of severe head and body trauma and multiple stab wounds of the pickaxe. Karla and Danny leave, and as they said, they took Jerry's motorcycle. They head to Doug, Danny's brother's apartment. So this is a different house than where they live. And when they get back at like 5 o'clock in the morning, they are so stoked on what they did. Even though the two guys were like, dude, Karla's fucking crazy, there was an excitement for them that they had just gotten away with this crazy thing. These people don't have any fucking morals. And so they start telling Doug and Carrie about the murders in detail. This is where the detail comes out, where Karla says that she orgasmed while she was murdering him. Her exact words, I hate that I have to say this, that she said to her sister are, every time I picked Jerry, I grinned and got a nut. That's what she told her sister. But then, after all of this, Doug actually decides that they should get rid of the evidence. So they take some of the parts from the bike and they get rid of it in the river. The next day, the bloody pickaxe murders are all over the news and the investigation begins. The police found the bodies and the news described them as hacked up. They had been hit over 20 times and the 3-foot pickaxe was left in Deborah's body. It was the final blow. The news report says that his motorcycle was missing, his El Camino was missing, his wallet, and they dubbed it a pickaxe murder. Danny and Karla are tickled. They love it. They even said that they're famous now and they're famous pickaxe murderers. They're giggling, they're having a good time, they feel like they got away with it. But this is the moment that Carrie realizes something is terrifyingly wrong with her sister. Not only did she murder these people brutally, but she enjoyed it, and she feels absolutely no remorse. She begins to fear for her life, and so does Doug. And that's the moment that Doug and Carrie, both of the siblings of the two killers, decide that they're going to snitch. Police didn't really have any leads until 5 weeks later when Doug and Carrie decided that enough is enough. I mean, I cannot believe that they actually got away with this for 5 weeks. If it wasn't for their bragging and their siblings actually having a bit of a conscience, this possibly would have never gotten solved, which is very scary considering Karla enjoyed it. She not only enjoyed the act of violence, but she got physical, sexual pleasure from it. And on top of that, she's a drug addict that needs money. She would have done this over and over and over again. So Doug has a friend that's actually a homicide detective. His name is J.C. Mosier. And he goes in with Carrie and lays everything out. He's like, look, Karla and Danny committed the murders. They had another friend. We don't really know much about that guy. But like, these two were at our house. They did it. We need them out of our lives. We need them out of the house. What do we do? So they set him up with a wire. So Doug agrees to wear a wire. And then he hops on his bike and he moseys on over to where Karla and Danny are. And Karla and Danny are, hey, brother, hey, family. Like, this is just how they are. And he goes over and he's got to get them to talk about the murders, which he probably feels like won't be much of an issue. They love to talk about it. They're famous. They're famous pickaxe murderers now. So he brings it up by telling Karla and Danny that, the police say that they have 2 suspects. Karla's like, oh, they're just digging. He tries to get them to talk about it a little bit more, and Karla never directly addresses it too much, but she never denies it. She never says, I don't know what you're talking about. She's not responding in a way that somebody that didn't do it would respond. Throughout this whole conversation, it's like an hour long, it seems like they have no fear of the police or that they're gonna find out it was them. But at one point during this conversation, Karla actually says that she was surprised it took that long to bludgeon Jerry to death. This is the quote that really seals her fate. And the police department is able to pick up Karla Faye Tucker for the murders of Jerry Dean and Deborah. Now, something happens just a couple days into Karla getting to the jail. What does Karla value most? I ask you this. What does she want above all? A family, a sense of community. And one day when she walks through the jail doors, there was a Christian prison ministry group that was doing a puppet show about God. And when she sees that, she said the Holy Spirit just came down to her and it swallowed her up whole and she felt the presence of God. Christianity is a community. I mean, this is also how cults suck people in. Now, I'm not saying that Christianity is necessarily a cult, but you have a vulnerable person that's in a bad situation, that doesn't have any family or community, and they value belonging, they value community, and then you present this thing in front of them that says, we will accept you no matter what as long as you let us into your heart. Boom. And Karla decides that she's gonna be a Christian. But first, she steals a Bible. Now, the books were actually free to take from the prison, but she thought that she was stealing it, which I think says a lot. But, maybe some people will give her some slack because they're like, she hasn't read it yet. She hasn't gotten to the 10 Commandments. Karla said that she took that Bible back to her jail cell and she started reading it and she felt the presence of God swelling up in her soul and she started to cry and ask the Lord for forgiveness. She said that she wasn't afraid of man or anyone else. The only person that she was afraid of was God. And she felt like God knew exactly what she did and she needed to give a full confession. Now, Karla's arrest for the murders and her conversion to Christianity all happened within a matter of days. So when the news and the media wanted to interview her, she was a Christian. From the very beginning of all of the, media firestorm over the PICKAXE murders that were predominantly committed by a woman, she was a Christian. And in Texas, being a Christian is above all. Anybody can be saved by God. I mean, in towns like this, especially in this era, we really put all of that on a pedestal. I think it's because we as human beings on this earth, we can't decide if God forgives Karla Faye or not. And she's checking off all the boxes. She's accepted him into her heart. She's saying all the things that we hear in church and she sounds serious. I mean, they ate it up. She ended up getting a lot of press. Karla Faye Tucker did so many interviews. It's incredible. Now, I want to remind you guys of something else. This is very important. Karla Faye Tucker does not have an identity. She has been searching for one since she was a child. So no matter what she says, no matter what family she's joined, no matter what community she's clung on to, she's taking the traits of that community and applying that to herself. So, in my opinion, none of this is real. Karla's identity can change at the drop of a hat, depending on what community she's attached herself to. And right here, right now, the community is Christianity. 2 weeks ago, it was the bikers. But the rules change just like that because her identity changes depending on what she needs to be for safety in the moment. So, could Karla really truly be Christian or think she's a Christian? Sure, I think so. But could that change in 10 years if Christianity was no longer serving her? Absolutely. If being a Christian got Karla out of jail, and then she got out of jail and then was bored of being Christian and found some group of punk kids or artsy people, I think she would just switch right over. Now, despite all the press and the headlines, Karla still has to go to trial. She went to trial and the jury weighed her background. She actually had no prior convictions, but she had a history of violence with her ex-husband. And also she had a history of violent behavior through like her psychiatric evaluations. She talked pretty openly about being physically violent with a lot of people, and that came out in court. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was intoxicated and temporarily insane, but it didn't do much for her. I think probably because of the brutality of the crime. On April 11th, 1984, the jury actually found her guilty of first-degree murder. This wasn't second, this was first-degree murder. She had been talking about killing Jerry for weeks prior, but people thought Karla was just running her mouth. But then when they made a plan to go to his house, and when you also factor in the brutality of the crime, this had to be first degree. 2 weeks later, she was actually sentenced to death. Look, guys, we're in Texas. Y'all know how it is. If you do something real bad, Texas will put you in that chair real fast. A couple years later, her lawyer tried to appeal the decision, but the jury upheld it. And around this time, Danny's trial was also beginning. He was convicted of first-degree murder as well and sentenced to death, but he ended up dying in prison of liver failure. Karla's original execution date was set for 1992, but her lawyer tried really hard to use the public outcry because there was one. They were like, she's a Christian. And he also really played to her personality and her news interviews and tried to get this overturned. He ended up stalling it for quite a few years. He was filing appeals all through 1993 to 1997. During this time, Karla was doing her thing. Look, hold on. Was Karla really healed? Was she really as different of a person as she said? Because Karla ended up marrying the priest. She ended up marrying the prison pastor, and not like an inmate that was doing a couple sermons. Y'all know there's inmates that be up in jail doing the Sunday sermons, and honestly, some of them are real good at it. But no, she married the actual minister. His name was Dana Brown, and I personally raise an eyebrow to this because sure, I feel like Karla could definitely find real love, but a lot of times when people are seeking safety and security in a community, they try to attach themselves to a person of high power because it gives them more security. She might have thought that this was a good look for her, like, oh, she's such a Christian, she's married to a holy man, you know? But for me, I raise an eyebrow to this because where I come from, usually the pastor is already married. So the pastor's wife, like they met before he became the pastor. So this just comes off as weird to me. You guys are gonna have to tell me if I'm being like super judgmental about this or not. And it's okay if you think I am and you don't agree. I don't care. That's why I'm asking you, right? I hate that I can't always have a two-way conversation with you guys here. I can have a two-way conversation on Twitch when I'm streaming, but here I'm just like, hello? Do you guys agree or disagree? You know, I care. I do. But I thought that was interesting. She married the prison minister. Now, marrying Dana and processing all of these appeals actually did get her a lot of attention. In 98, she asked them to commute her sentence from death to life in prison instead. She was doing interviews on the 700 Club, Larry King. She was just all over the news. Everyone knew who Karla Faye Tucker was. You know, she would get up there and she had these big like cheeks and she had big brown eyes and she would say, well, as long as you let, God into your heart, come what may. And, if I'm going home because it's God's will. And people just ate that up, man. They ate it up. Do you understand now why I had to tell you all of the details of the murder and not leave anything out? Because Karla's childhood is incredibly traumatic, and you can't help but feel for her. And then the brutality of the crime is a horror movie. Like I said, the only way I can describe it as a horror movie. But then we get to this piece of the puzzle where she's like, but I'm safe now, And personally, I think that Karla really did believe the things that she was saying, because a good liar has to believe what they're saying in order to make a good liar. I think she felt some of this in her soul because she needed that sense of community. And I think she really does bond with it. She fully falls into it. But do I think Karla would have killed again if she wasn't caught? Yes, absolutely. Do I think that Karla would have changed her identity again 10 years later after Christianity wasn't serving her? Yes, I think so. If the press died down and nobody cared about Karla after she became a Christian, she might have just become anything else. Ironically, though, if she had gotten out of jail, personally, I don't think that she would have gone back to the drug and biker lifestyle, because she had been sober and probably very remorseful of a lot of things over her 10 or 15 years in jail. But I do think she would have jumped ship to another identity because she's just not firm in who she is. A lot of people struggle with not knowing who they are and making things stick. When you are lost in a life that is full of drama, high emotional patterns, violence, sex, drugs, anything like that, there's no room to find out who you are, because everything is high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low. Your personality becomes the highs and lows. You have to work to get to a place of safety, and you have to want to calm those things down just a little bit so you can find those moments of peace to find who you are. And it's not easy. It is not easy when life gives you as difficult of a beginning as Karla had. But that doesn't mean that we should just give up and fucking kill people. So despite her clear change, Karla's final appeal for clemency was rejected on February 2nd, 1998. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles actually said the horrific nature of the case carried a lot of weight, and that's why they decided to stick to their decision. Karla Faye Tucker was a double axe murderer. The public continued to flood the government. The public even went so far as to flood Governor Bush's desk, asking him to seek mercy on him. It was actually an international thing. I saw a video where people in Italy were holding up signs trying to tell them not to kill Karla Faye Tucker. So her sticking to, I believe in God, I'm a Christian now, it really resonated with a lot of people. And there was a big public outcry. But regardless, the state did not listen. They wanted to set an example for Karla Faye Tucker. So on February 3rd, the national coverage continued. It was her execution day. There were cameras everywhere talking to her attorneys, trying to get a glimpse of Karla, reporters that wanted to hear her last words. Everyone was at attention. As always, death row gives you whatever you want for your final meal. Karla Faye Tucker asked for a banana, a peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing. Ahead of her lethal injection, they asked her if she had any final words. She said, "Yes, sir. I would like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, that I'm so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this. Baby, I love you. Ron, give Peggy a hug for me. Everybody's been so good to me. I love all of you very, very much. I'm going to be face to face with Jesus now. Ward and Baggett, thank you all so much. You've been so good to me. I love all of you very much, and I will see you when you get there. I will wait for you." Karla was pronounced dead at 6:45 p.m. It was witnessed by her sister Carrie, her husband, the pastor Dana Brown, and family members of Deborah Thornton. Regardless of how you feel about the case as a whole, this case has a lot of emotions. It has a lot of different angles. But there are two things that I know to be true. One, Karla Faye Tucker had a horrific childhood that she never, ever deserved. Two, Karla Faye Tucker committed one of the most horrific acts of violence that I have ever heard in American history.